Good morning, dear Sangha. Today we have a session of questions and answers. And it will last about 1 hour and a half. Those of you who would like to ask a question are invited to come here and sit close to Thai. And you will take a turn to sit on that chair so that everyone can see you when you ask the question. And of course, you ask the question of your heart, a real question about the practice, having to do with suffering, difficulties, happiness, hope, and so on. And we know that a good question can profit many people. And we also know that a good question does not need to be very long. In the case you don't comfortable sitting here, you might like to write down the question on a sheet of paper and have someone brought here to Sister Tung Nghiêm, Sister Pai, and she will read it. And from time to time, we take one question that has been written down on a sheet of paper. And those of you who come for the first time to such a retreat are encouraged to come forward and ask questions. There are those of us who have attended so many retreats already, and we should allow our new brothers and sisters in the Dharma to have a chance to ask their question. So please, if you have a question, please slowly come up here and sit around Thai. Before we ask a question, we breathe in and out with one sound on the bell. And after that, we are calm enough, we are clear enough to ask the question. Today is May the 10th in the year 2008. We are in Hanoi with our retreat Engaged Buddhism in the 21st century. We have a session of questions and answers now, and this is the first question. Let's enjoy our breathing.
Thai, how would applied Buddhism look to the healthcare profession?
Healthcare profession. As a health professional, you have to take care of yourself in order to take care of other people. You have to know your limit in order to avoid burning out. You have to get enough nourishment and healing for yourself in order to go far. So taking care of ourselves, bringing the practice in our daily life and the life of our family is to have the condition to help for a long time. And you show yourself as an example for those who come to you and get the help. So the health helping professionals should embody the practice. And we know that the intervention of medicine, the intervention of the doctor can have an immediate effect. But if the person does not change his or her way of living, and then they will have the same kind of difficulty and problems again and again. So we should tell them that using medicines is okay, but we should change our way of life in order, later on, you don't have to use medicines, and you don't have to get the help of other people. And I think doctors and nurses and psychotherapists, they have to come together and form their own sangha to take refuge in and to practice, to maintain the practice. And that is not for ourselves alone, but for the people who want to help. So the sangha is very important. A sangha of doctors, a sangha of nurses, a sangha of health professionals is very important. They should practice maintaining their balance, their health, their joy, their compassion, so that they can go on for a long time. Thank you.
My father is retiring after 55 years of leading companies. He has decided that unless he can remain a very important person by having a high position or being affiliated with a prestigious institution, he is, in his words, irrelevant. He does not want to live as a result. He has said he cares about no one and has no interest left in life. I've tried watering his good seeds and spending time with him, but his anger is very deep, and his manas is 72 plus years strong. How can I help him?
We might help him by telling him to learn to look deeply into his own person, to understand himself. We are usually caught in our notion of self. We are not aware that self is only made of non-self elements, like a flower is made only of non-flower elements. Sometimes we notice that we have talents, we have skillfulness and so on. But we should know that these talents, this skillfulness have come from our ancestors. And when you know that the suffering, your own suffering, and your own talent, your own happiness have come from your ancestors, you are no longer caught in the idea that all these things belong to you. You are no longer very proud of your talent, because that is something that your ancestors have transmitted to you. In the Buddhist tradition, when we touch the earth, We used to open our two hands to show that we are nothing at all. We have nothing in us. Everything has been transmitted to our ancestors. There is nothing to be ashamed of. There is nothing to be proud of. A self is made of non-self element. We inherit many things from our ancestors. So in that light, we can release everything very quickly. The insight that self is made of non-self element can be very liberating. And then it will be possible for us to see ourselves in our children, in our friends. And we know that the disintegration of this body does not mean our end. We always continue. We continue beautifully or not so beautifully. It depends on how we handle the present moment. If in the present moment we can produce thoughts of loving kindness, forgiveness, and compassion, if in the present moment we can say very compassionate, helping words, inspiring words, is in the present moment we can perform beautiful acts of compassion, protecting, saving, and then that is our continuation. We will have a beautiful continuation. And we have sovereignty over the present moment. We can make our continuation beautiful or not so beautiful. And if your father have access to that kind of insight, he will change. He will suffer less, and he will have the joy of living. He can see that he is in you, and you will carry him into the future. And all his talents, all his experiences are not lost. You continue to have them, and you will do your best to transmit these qualities into the future through your children and grandchildren. And then your father will have the insight of who he really is.
Dear Thai, dear Sangha, my question is a bit mindfulness of joy. Joy comes with a lot of excitement in it, especially for me. And I wonder if you could explain a little bit more about, should we just watch our joy with detachment and not be too involved with it in act? Or, but if we do this, we would be calming it down until it becomes a seed again. So in this case, we would not be trying to be the good guest, welcoming the guest as long as we can in our living room of our mind. And then would this go against the fourth practice of full diligence you taught yesterday? I'm not sure if I'm clear enough.
There is another question. What is the difference between the pleasure sought by manas and the joy and happiness that the individual seeks to bring out of store consciousness to flower in mind consciousness? Mindfulness make it possible for us to see into the nature of the joy, of the excitement, of the sorrow. In Buddhism, we speak of the difference between joy and happiness. In joy, there may be still some excitement. And when there is excitement, you are not as peaceful as you wish to be. In Buddhist terminology, the term an lạc, always an and lạc, always come together. An means peace, and lạc means happiness. A true happiness cannot be without peace. And excitement is not yet very peaceful. You have excitement. Excitement is not happiness yet. And when you are mindful, you see breathing in, I have some excitement. And I don't have enough peace, so my happiness is not truly there, nourishing and healing. Mindfulness makes it possible for us to look at the pleasant feeling that is there. And we know that this a truly pleasant feeling or not. It may be a pleasant feeling, but it may bring unpleasant feelings later on. Like when you drink some liquor, there is some pleasant feeling. But you know with your mindfulness that later on your liver will suffer and will experience unpleasant feelings that will last longer. So mindfulness makes it possible for us to see into the nature of the feeling so that we know that this is a wholesome, pleasant feeling, or a kind of pleasant feeling that will bring sorrow and suffering later on. So the key is mindfulness. We should be nourished by joy and peace and happiness. And if that joy, that peace, that happiness only has the power to nourish, to heal, and that is no harm. We also know that experiencing suffering may help to develop more compassion and understanding. So while we experience suffering, we can learn, and we really do not suffer. Manas does not have that kind of mindfulness, that kind of insight. So its manner of seeking pleasure is just an instinct. And Manas does not know that pleasure may be dangerous. When you throw into the water a hook with a bait, and the fish think that is something very exciting, very delicious, and the fish may bite at the bait and get hooked. And sometimes the bait is not a real bait. It is in plastic. It has the appearance of something delicious. So mindfulness and insight make it possible for us to see that this is dangerous as an object of pleasure. And you can refrain from being attracted by that object of pleasure. You know that you will die, or you will almost die if you bite into that object of pleasure. But that is mindfulness, that is mind consciousness in contemplation, in action. But manas ignore that, because manas is just the instinct. And that is why manas is always seeking pleasure, any kind of pleasure. And manas ignore the danger of pleasure. Manas is seeking to run away from suffering, and manas does not know that suffering can be helpful. And mind consciousness is not manas. Mind consciousness has access to many kinds of seeds down there in store consciousness, and may bring out insight, understanding, in order to bring transformation to manas. And therefore, the practice of mindfulness, in order to be in the present moment, in order to recognize all the feelings, whether they are painful, or pleasant, or neutral, and to look deeply into their nature is a very important practice. And we know what to do, what not to do, and how to deal with this feeling, this emotion, in order not to suffer right now and not to suffer in the future.
I'm just explaining that it's my first time on retreat with Diane. I'm very honored and grateful. But the rest has to be in English. My husband and I have been trying to conceive a child for much time.
But not very successful. I understand that.
And similarly, my sister and her husband have recently experienced a pregnancy loss. So we've both been experiencing a lot of suffering. And it's just really difficult, it's really sad. Because I think one of my highest aspirations is to experience the miracle
Of having a child.
Yeah. Thanks. And it's just really sometimes very intense emotion, because it's the intensity of life wanting to continue itself, and it just causes such a deep, grievous longing. And it's actually even more difficult because I actually practice Chinese medicine, and I work in a clinic where we deal with infertility. So it's something that I see every day, and it's very difficult for me to not water those seeds of suffering. So it is my most sincere intention to nourish my healing practice and nourish my patients' healing from the heart of my own experience, and it's from here that I ask for your guidance.
Someone said that happiness is something that you don't recognize why it is there, and that you feel that you just lost it after it is gone. And happiness can be in different forms. We might focus our attention on one thing, and and we call it the basic condition, the most fundamental condition of our happiness. If we don't have that, and then we don't have happiness. But there are many other conditions of happiness that are there, available in the here and now, and we just ignore them, and we think that only the other object is a true condition of happiness, but now we don't have. Someone looking at you may recognize all the conditions of happiness that he does not have. And that person may wonder why, with plenty of conditions of happiness like that, you do not enjoy your life. You are looking for something else. So the practice is, first of all, to say that happiness can be found, can be touched in many aspects. And looking deeply into the human person, we see that the human person wants to continue long in the future. We want to have children, we want to have grandchildren, we want to go to the future, to last very long in time. And that is the nature of other animals and vegetables also. Every living thing wants to last long, to be continued long into the future, and not just human beings. Someone like myself, a monk, always also has the willingness, the desire to last, to go to the future, to be continued. So that is very normal, that is very human, that you want to be continued, and you want to be continued beautifully. And we know that there are those who have children, but who are not happy with their children, and they prefer, and they said that if they had not given to these children, life to the children, they could be happier. You have to take into account all these things. I do not have myself blood children, but I have a lot of spiritual children, and they make me very happy, and they carry me into the future, and I'm completely satisfied. I don't need to have a blood child, and that is a way of looking. Transmission can be done in many ways. You want to transmit the best thing you have into the future, and you can transmit yourself genetically or spiritually. And when you look into my disciples and friends and spiritual children, you can see me, because they have a lot of me inside of them that can be recognized very easily. We are not blood children of the Buddha, but we feel that we are real children of Buddha, because we have inherited a lot from the Buddha. He has transmitted himself to us, not by the genetical way, but by the spiritual way. And if you take into account these different modes of transmission, you would see that we need not to suffer, because we cannot transmit us genetically into the future. But who knows? Enjoy the conditions of happiness you actually have. And one day you may have that happiness also. But I think that if you enjoy this, you may be completely satisfied. Every door is open. Good luck. There's a question about depression and medication.
Dear Thai, we had a few friends who wrote to Thai after Thai spoke about depression and how nothing can survive without food. And they wrote either from their own experience or their experience of a loved one or a client if they wrote as a psychotherapist. And their experience that sometimes there's also a physiological aspect causing depression, and that some of these people truly need to take some kind of medication. And the friends who wrote were concerned that Thai's teaching could be misunderstood by the people who may still need to have medicine, and they may stop taking their medicine because they may misunderstand what Thai said to say that there's no medicine that's needed because they only need to stop consuming things that are harmful to their mind, and then that's enough. So they asked Thai to clarify.
In the teaching of the Buddha, the biological and the mental, they interact. They manifest based on each other. Our emotions, our feelings are very connected to the chemicals in our body. And our feeling, our emotion can produce chemicals that will be toxic to ourselves. And the inhibition and these feelings and emotions can inhibit the production of a certain chemicals, the neurotransmitter, for instance, and that create an imbalance in your body. So the mental can create the biological, and the biological can have an effect on the mental. So things rely on each other to manifest. We don't reduce the importance of one side. All of us have the seed of depression. All of us. All of us have the seed of mental illness. But if we are in a good environment, these seeds will have not much chance to manifest. We have received the genes from our ancestors, our parents. And we know by science that the genes, they don't turn on by themselves. They are turned on by our way of thinking, our feelings, our perceptions, and our environment. It is the environment that helps turn on the genes in ourselves, the good and the negative genes. And the genes are equivalent to the bijas, the seeds that we speak about in the teaching of the Buddha. They might be the same. They might not describe it as only mental or only physiological. These two aspects belong to the same reality. Neuroscientists used to ask the question about the difference between the brain and the mind. Is it true that the brain produces the mind? Is the mind is a product of the brain? How could the activities of neurons bring about the subjective mind? These are questions. But in fact, mind and brain, they interact. This is because that is, this is not because that is not. It's like a body and mind. It's not the body produces the mind, or the mind produces the body, but mind and body are two aspects of the same thing, and they always rely on each other in order to manifest. It's like a coin, a piece of €1. There is the head and the tail, and without the head, the tail cannot be, and vice versa. So mind, body are not two distinct entities. They are aspects of the same thing. And the seed of depression that now manifests may have been transmitted to us by many generations of ancestors. There may have been generation when that seed did not manifest. But now, because of the new environment, that seed has a chance to manifest. And that is why we have to take into account the element of environment. And environment is the object of consumption. Because elements of the environment touch off and turn on the seeds, turn on the genes in us. And that is why the teaching of the Buddha about food is very important. We consume not only the edible food, but we consume also with what we hear, we see, we feel, we touch, and so on. Sensory impressions, sensory impressions is the second kind of food. And the third kind of food is intention, our evolution, the kind of deep desire in us. And the fourth kind of nutriment is consciousness. We consume consciousness. If we live with a number of people around us, we consume their way, the collective way of thinking, of perceiving. And in the beginning, we don't see that as beautiful, but because all of people around us think that it's beautiful, and then slowly we come to see it as beautiful also. So we are influenced by the collective thinking around us, and that is also consumption. And our depression has to do with all these sources of nutriments of food. And we know that if there is an imbalance within our mind and our body, there may be some disorder in our mind, in our body. And we know that chemicals have to do with our feelings and emotions. Our emotions and feelings have connection have to do with the chemicals also. If we used to think, to worry, to perceive in such a way, and then our body can continue to produce or even overproduce such chemicals that will bring disorder to ourselves, to our body and mind. Or if we think and do and consume in such a way, we may inhibit the production of such chemicals that are essential to our balance. So both aspects are important, and we have to take care of both. Medication may help, but if you count only on medication, you are wrong. And doctors and psychotherapists, they know that. Medication can help, and you need medication, but don't rely on medication alone. You have to change your way of life. You have to change your environment, and one day you'll be able to stop taking medication. If you don't change your way of life, if you don't change your sources of impression, you continue to use medications, and sometime later they will not work because your body will get used to it.